It's way more than just passively catching sounds. He breaks it down into 6 pillars.
Ever feel like you're talking, but nobody's really listening? It's like that old saying, in one ear and out the other. Well, get ready to flex those ear muscles because today's deep dive is all about unlocking the power of truly listening with Echoes of Silence by Ranjit Singh.
And this is just some dry self-help book, What's fascinating is that Singh found his inspiration in the most relatable of places, the workplace.
Okay, spill the tea.
Think those sometimes awkward, sometimes intense performance reviews? He noticed that even with the best intentions, communication breakdowns happen all the time.
Oh, tell me about it. I once had a boss who thought nodding along at everything was the same as active listening. Spoiler alert. It wasn't.
Exactly. And Singh backs this up with a pretty eye-opening statistic. 80% of what we learn from others hinges on how well we listen. Let that sink in for a second. 80%. Yet in this world of endless notifications and mental multitasking, really tuning in feels like a lost art.
It's true. It's like our brains are stuck on shuffle mode, jumping between thoughts without ever hitting play on a full conversation. So how do we escape this cycle of half listening and actually master the art of truly being present? What's Singh's secret sauce?
So he dives deep into this idea of active listening. And it's way more than just passively catching sounds. He breaks it down into 6 pillars. Think of them as the foundational elements for building better listening skills.
Okay, let's unpack this. What's pillar number 1?
First up, attention. Imagine your attention is like a muscle. The more you exercise it by focusing on the speaker, the stronger it becomes, allowing you to tune out distractions more effectively.
So instead of letting my mind wander to that never-ending to-do list, I need to consciously flex those attention muscles and lock them onto the person I'm talking to.
You got it. And that leads us right into the second pillar, intention. It's about going into a conversation with a genuine desire to understand, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
It's about choosing to be present in that moment. I like that. What comes next?
Pillar number 3, empathy. Now, this is where things get really interesting. It's not just about listening to the words being said, but also tuning into the emotions behind them.
So putting myself in their shoes, trying to see the world through their lens, even if I haven't walked a mile in them.
Precisely. And Singh makes a key distinction here. Empathy isn't the same as sympathy. Sympathy is feeling sorry for someone, while empathy is about connecting with their emotional experience, saying, I get it, you're not alone in this.
It's like the difference between handing someone a tissue and actually offering a shoulder to cry on. One is about acknowledgement, the other is about connection. I'm starting to see how powerful this stuff can be. So what are the remaining pillars of active listening? What else do we need to be mindful of? Okay, we've covered attention, intention, and empathy. 3 pretty powerful pillars of active listening. What are the last 3?
Well, next up we have the fascinating world of nonverbal communication. All those subtle cues that speak volumes beyond the words themselves.
It's like that saying, it's not what you said, it's how you said it. So what should we be paying attention to?
Think about it. A nod can signal agreement, while crossed arms might suggest defensiveness. Even a slight raise of an eyebrow can speak volumes. And then there's tone of voice, which can completely change the meaning of a sentence.
Wow, so we really are having 2 conversations at once, one with words and one with our bodies. No wonder miscommunications happen.
Exactly. And to add another layer of complexity, those nonverbal cues can vary widely across cultures. What's considered polite in one culture might be seen as rude in another.
It's like there's a whole secret language we need to learn.
In a way, there is. But the good news is, the more we practice active listening, the more attuned we become to those subtle cues.
So it's about sharpening our observation skills alongside our listening skills.
Absolutely. Now, pillar number 5 is all about feedback. Those little nods, and I understands, that show the speaker, hey, I'm with you, keep going.
It's like throwing another log on the fire of the conversation, right? Keeps things going, shows you're engaged.
Precisely. And finally, we reach the last pillar, mindfulness. This is about being fully present in the moment of the conversation. No letting your mind wander to that to-do list, no planning your rebuttal, just pure, focused presence.
Now, that sounds easier said than done. I mean, we're all guilty of drifting off during a conversation sometimes, especially in our hyper-connected world. So how do we actually cultivate this listener's mindset that Singh keeps talking about?
Well, he outlines 6 key traits that make a good listener. And the good news is these aren't set in stone. They can be learned and developed over time, just like those attention muscles we were talking about.
Okay, now you're speaking my language. I love the idea that we can actually train ourselves to be better listeners. So what are these magical traits?
First up is open-mindedness. Think of it like approaching a conversation with a beginner's mind, ready to receive whatever the speaker wants to share, without letting your own biases color your perception.
It's about quieting that inner critic and truly trying to see things from their point of view, even if you don't necessarily agree with everything they're saying.
Exactly. Then there's patience, which, in today's world of instant gratification, can feel like a superpower. But it's crucial for letting the conversation breathe, allowing the speaker time to fully express themselves without feeling rushed.
I can see how that would be so important, especially in a world where everyone's always in a hurry. Sometimes people just need to feel heard, not rush towards a solution.
Absolutely. And that ties in nicely with the next trait, curiosity. It's that spark of genuine interest that makes you want to learn more about what the other person is thinking and feeling.
It's like you become a conversational detective, searching for clues and uncovering hidden layers of meaning.
I love that analogy. Then there's emotional stability. Now, this doesn't mean you become an emotionless robot, but it's about maintaining composure, especially in emotionally charged conversations.
Right. It's about being the calm in their storm, providing that steady presence so they feel comfortable opening up.
You got it. Next, we have reflective thinking. Taking a moment to digest what you've heard, connecting it to the bigger picture, maybe even relating it back to your own experiences.
So instead of just letting the information go in one ear and out the other, you're actively engaging with it, making it meaningful.
Exactly. And last but not least, there's active engagement. This is about showing the speaker, through both verbal and nonverbal cues, that you're right there with them, making eye contact, nodding, those little verbal affirmations, all those signals that scream, I'm listening.
So it's not enough to just think about what they're saying. We need to make sure our bodies are speaking that language of engagement too. But let's be real, becoming a master listener isn't always easy. There are some pretty big barriers that can get in the way. What are some of the things that can trip us up on our quest for better listening? So many potential pitfalls on the path to becoming a better listener. What are some of the obstacles we might encounter?
Singh breaks these barriers down into three categories: psychological, environmental, and social. Let's start with those mental hurdles we create for ourselves.
Okay, so what kind of psychological barriers are we talking about?
Well, think about those times you've walked into a conversation already knowing what the other person was going to say, or maybe even disagreeing before they finished their sentence.
Oh, I've been there. It's like our own biases and preconceived notions act like noise-canceling headphones, blocking out anything that doesn't fit our existing worldview.
Exactly. And then there's the emotional noise we bring to conversations. We've all had those days where we're so caught up in our own heads dealing with stress or personal stuff that it's nearly impossible to truly listen to anyone else.
It's like trying to have a conversation in the middle of a hurricane, right? Your own internal chaos just drowns everything else out. How can we quiet that storm and be more present?
Self-awareness is key. Recognizing your own biases, being mindful of your emotional state going into a conversation, even something as simple as picking a quiet spot for a chat. These small choices can make a huge difference.
It's about setting the stage for good listening, both internally and externally.
Exactly. And it's not just about minimizing the negative, it's also about cultivating the positive.
Mm.
Leaning into those traits we talked about: open-mindedness, curiosity, emotional stability. The more we practice them, the stronger our listening muscles become.
So it's like going to the mental gym for our ears. Now, what about those environmental barriers Singh talks about? I imagine that can play a big role in how well we listen to.
Absolutely. Think noisy coffee shops, constant interruptions, uncomfortable chairs, all those external factors that can make it hard to focus on a conversation.
Or how about that feeling when you're trying to have a serious conversation and your phone's blowing up with notifications? It's like a digital symphony trying to steal your attention.
Right. And then there are those social barriers, which can be the trickiest to navigate. We're talking about things like cultural differences in communication styles, power dynamics that can make it hard to speak freely, even gender stereotypes that influence how we listen and speak to each other.
It's like there's this whole other layer of unspoken rules and expectations that can muddy the waters of communication. So how do we navigate those complexities?
Adaptation is key. We have to be willing to adjust our communication style depending on who we're talking to. What works with a close friend might not fly with a colleague or a client. It's about being sensitive to those unspoken cues and adjusting accordingly.
It sounds like becoming a master listener requires not only sharp ears, but also social awareness and flexibility. Now, we can't talk about listening in the 21st century without addressing the elephant in the room. Technology, it's like a double-edged sword, right?
You hit the nail on the head. Singh dedicates a whole chapter to digital age challenges, and he doesn't sugarcoat it. That constant barrage of notifications, the allure of multitasking, it can be a recipe for fractured attention.
So how do we embrace the conveniences of technology without letting it completely hijack our ability to listen?
Singh is a big advocate for creating device-free zones and times. Think about designating certain areas in your home, like the dinner table, or specific hours of the day where phones are off limits. It's about creating sacred spaces for real human connection.
Love that. What other digital detox tips does he offer?
He's also a big fan of scheduling digital detoxes, even if it's just for a few hours each week. Stepping away from the constant stream of information can do wonders for your mental clarity and your ability to focus when you need to.
It's like hitting the reset button on your brain, allowing yourself to recharge and reconnect with the analog world. But it's not all doom and gloom in the digital age, right? There must be ways technology can enhance our listening skills.
Absolutely. Think about video conferencing tools, for example. They can actually make us more attentive listeners because we're forced to focus on the speaker's face and body language in a way that we might not in a crowded conference room.
That's a really good point. It's like having a front row seat to the nuances of their communication. What other tech tools can help us become better listeners?
Features like live captioning and transcription can be incredibly helpful for people with hearing impairments or for anyone who's trying to follow along in a language that's not their native tongue. Technology can bridge communication gaps and make conversations more accessible.
It's like having a universal translator for human connection.
Exactly. And even something as simple as using headphones to minimize distractions while listening to a podcast can make a big difference.
Meta moment. You're right, though. It's about choosing tools that support our listening goals, not hinder them.
Precisely. As our workplaces and social lives become increasingly virtual, Singh also offers some insightful tips for making the most of online conversations. He emphasizes clear, concise language, avoiding jargon, and using those visual cues we talked about, nodding, maintaining eye contact with the camera to show we're engaged.
It's about adapting that active listening toolkit to the digital realm, making sure our virtual presence is just as present as our physical presence.
Exactly. And as we wrap up our deep dive into the art of listening, I think Singh leaves us with a really powerful and deceptively simple thought. He talks about the importance of paying attention to the sound of silence in our conversations. When does it feel comfortable? And when does it make you want to jump in?
I love that. It's such a subtle but profound observation. That space between can tell us so much about how well we're really listening.
It really can. Are we allowing for those pauses, those moments of reflection, or are we rushing to fill every silence with our own thoughts and opinions?
It's about getting comfortable with those silences, recognizing them not as gaps in the conversation, but as opportunities for deeper understanding to emerge.
Precisely. And on that note, I think we've done a pretty good job unpacking the power of listening today.
We really have. We explored the 6 pillars of active listening, dove into those pesky barriers that can hinder our best efforts, and even learned how to navigate the digital world without sacrificing genuine connection. If you take away just one thing from our deep dive into Ranjit Singh's Echoes of Silence, let it be this. Listening is a skill, an art, and a choice. It's a muscle we can all strengthen with practice and intention. So as you navigate the conversations of your day from the boardroom to the breakfast table, remember to truly listen with an open heart, a curious mind, and maybe, just maybe, a newfound appreciation for the sound of silence.